Tonight on Dreadful Visions, we're exploring places that are supposed to feel like a home away from home. Every year, millions of people unlock the front door of a stranger's property expecting nothing more than a comfortable stay. But sometimes, the house seems to remember its guests long after they've checked out. Story 1. The Locked Room Upstairs. Ryan and Sophie Bennett had been married for just over a year when they booked a weekend getaway in rural Vermont. Both worked demanding jobs in Boston, and they wanted 2 quiet days away from traffic, phones, and deadlines. After scrolling through dozens of listings, they found the perfect Airbnb, a beautifully restored farmhouse surrounded by dense woods, with a fireplace, a wraparound porch, and the promise of complete privacy. The listing had hundreds of positive reviews. One sentence near the bottom caught Ryan's attention. The upstairs storage room is locked and unavailable to guests. It didn't seem unusual. Most vacation rentals had an owner's closet or a room where cleaning supplies were stored. They arrived just before sunset. The host wasn't there. Instead, a lockbox beside the front door held the key, along with a handwritten welcome note wishing them a relaxing weekend. Inside, the farmhouse was spotless. Wooden floors creaked softly beneath their feet. Family photographs decorated the hallway. Fresh towels sat neatly folded on every bed. Everything looked exactly like the pictures online. That first evening was perfect. They cooked dinner, watched a movie beside the fireplace, and went to bed shortly after midnight. At exactly 2:41 a.m., Ryan woke to the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, walking across the ceiling above their bedroom. He opened his eyes and listened. The footsteps continued, one into the house, then the other, back and forth, as though someone was pacing the upstairs hallway. Ryan nudged Sophie awake. "Do you hear that?" She stayed quiet for a few seconds before slowly nodding. "Maybe another guest?" Ryan frowned. The listing clearly said they had rented the entire house. He grabbed his phone and checked the Airbnb booking again. Entire property. No shared spaces. The footsteps stopped as suddenly as they'd started. Ryan walked upstairs. The hallway was empty. Every bedroom door stood open. Only one door remained closed. The locked storage room. He placed his ear against it. Silence. The next morning, Ryan mentioned it to the host through the Airbnb app. The reply came a few minutes later. "Old houses make strange noises at night. Nothing to worry about." The explanation sounded reasonable. After all, the farmhouse was more than 100 years old. That evening, they drove into the nearby town for dinner. While chatting with the waitress, Sophie casually mentioned the farmhouse. The waitress smiled. "The one on Hollow Creek Road? Beautiful place." Sophie nodded. "Have you stayed there?" The waitress shook her head. "No, but people don't usually stay there more than one night." Ryan looked up. "Why?" The waitress hesitated before shrugging. "No idea. Just something I've noticed. People always check out early." Neither Ryan nor Sophie mentioned the footsteps. They returned to the farmhouse just before midnight. Everything felt normal. Until 2:41 a.m. The footsteps returned. This time, they stopped directly above the bedroom door. A long silence followed. Then, 3 slow knocks echoed from the ceiling. Knock, knock, knock. Ryan and Sophie looked at each other without saying a word. Then Ryan noticed something that made his stomach tighten. The bedroom door, which they'd locked before going to sleep, was now standing slightly open. Ryan slowly sat up in bed. The bedroom door had definitely been locked. He remembered checking it himself before they went to sleep. Now it stood open by several inches. The upstairs hallway beyond it was completely dark. He grabbed his phone, switched on the flashlight, and stepped into the hallway. Nothing. Every room looked exactly as it had before. Then he noticed something different. The locked storage room. The brass doorknob was moving. Not violently, just slowly, turning a few degrees to the left, then stopping. Ryan stood perfectly still. The handle turned again, this time a little farther, as though someone on the other side was gently trying to open a locked door. He backed away without making a sound. The handle stopped moving. Ryan hurried downstairs and spent the rest of the night awake with Sophie in the living room. By sunrise, they had almost convinced themselves that exhaustion had gotten the better of them. Still uneasy, Ryan contacted the host again. This time, he mentioned the footsteps, the knocking, and the moving doorknob. The reply came nearly an hour later. "I'm really sorry. I'll have someone inspect the property after you leave. Please don't try to unlock the upstairs room." That last sentence bothered Ryan. He hadn't mentioned trying to unlock it. How did the host know that had even crossed his mind? Later that afternoon, Sophie suggested they leave early. Ryan agreed. Before packing the car, he decided to take one last look upstairs. As he stood outside the locked room, he noticed something sticking out beneath the door, a small folded piece of paper. He bent down and pulled it through the gap. It wasn't old. The paper was clean. Written in shaky handwriting were just 6 words. "Please don't leave me alone again." Ryan's heart started racing. He immediately called the host. This time there was no answer. No reply to messages. Nothing. Instead of waiting, Ryan searched the hallway until he found a spare key hanging inside a kitchen drawer labeled emergency keys. One of them fit the upstairs door. Sophie begged him not to open it. He unlocked it anyway. The room was completely empty. No furniture, no boxes, no storage shelves, just bare wooden floorboards covered in dust. For a moment, Ryan almost laughed. Then Sophie quietly pointed toward the floor. There was only one set of footprints in the dust. Fresh muddy boot prints. They started in the center of the room, walked toward the doorway, and stopped exactly where Ryan and Sophie were standing. There were no footprints leading into the room, only footprints leading out. The two of them backed away immediately. Ryan locked the door again. Neither of them spoke while loading the car. As they pulled away from the farmhouse, Ryan finally received a call from the host. His voice sounded shaken. "You opened the room, didn't you?" Ryan admitted they had. There was a long silence. Then the host quietly confessed that the room had been empty for years. He kept it locked because every guest who slept in the house eventually reported hearing someone walking around inside it. He'd never believed them, until Ryan mentioned the note. The host drove to the farmhouse later that afternoon. When he entered the upstairs hallway, the storage room door was standing open. The spare key Ryan had used was still hanging in the kitchen. Inside the room, the note was gone, but something else had appeared. Fresh muddy footprints, starting in the middle of the floor, walking out into the hallway. For the first time, there was a second set beside them. Ryan and Sophie never booked another remote Airbnb. Months later, while looking for a place to stay during another trip, Ryan searched for the farmhouse online. The listing had disappeared. No reviews, no photos, nothing. It was as though the property had never existed. But every now and then, when Sophie can't sleep, she still opens the Airbnb app and searches the address out of curiosity. Every single time, the result is the same. No property found, except once. Very briefly, a listing appeared with no photographs and no description. Just one sentence beneath the title. "Room upstairs now available." Story 2. The guest who checked in before us. 26-year-old Noah Ramirez traveled constantly for work. As a software consultant based in Denver, he spent more nights in hotels and Airbnbs than he did in his own apartment. He'd stayed in everything from luxury penthouses to tiny studio apartments. And after hundreds of bookings, very little surprised him anymore. In April of 2026, he accepted a week-long contract in Seattle. Instead of booking a hotel, he found a modern Airbnb apartment overlooking Elliott Bay. The listing looked perfect. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a full kitchen, fast Wi-Fi, and one feature Noah particularly liked: a smart lock that let guests unlock the apartment using the Airbnb app instead of collecting physical keys. Check-in was completely automatic. At exactly 4 p.m., Noah received the notification. "Your stay has begun. Front door unlocked." He entered the apartment, unpacked his suitcase, and spent the evening answering emails before ordering takeout. Everything worked exactly as advertised. The following morning, another notification appeared on his phone while he was making coffee. "Front door unlocked." Noah frowned. He was standing inside the apartment. The front door was still closed. He walked over and checked it. Locked. Assuming the app had glitched, he ignored it. A few minutes later, another notification. Front door locked. That one made even less sense. He hadn't touched the lock. Later that afternoon, Noah messaged the host through Airbnb. "Hey, I keep getting lock notifications even though I'm already inside. Is that normal?" The reply came almost immediately. "Sometimes the system refreshes itself. Nothing to worry about." That sounded reasonable. Until the next night. At exactly 11:53 p.m., Noah was watching television when his phone vibrated again. Front door unlocked. He looked toward the entrance. The deadbolt remained locked. Nobody came inside. A few seconds later, front door locked. Noah walked over and checked the hallway through the peephole. Empty. No footsteps. No elevator doors opening. Nothing. By the third day, the notifications had become more frequent. Front door unlocked. Front door locked. Guest has arrived. That last one caught his attention. Guest has arrived? Noah immediately opened the Airbnb booking. Number of guests: 1. His name was the only one listed. He contacted customer support. The representative confirmed that no additional guests had been added to the reservation and nobody else had access to the apartment. That evening, Noah decided to test the lock himself. He locked the door from inside, unlocked it, locked it again. Every action produced a matching notification. The system worked perfectly. Satisfied that it wasn't malfunctioning, he went to bed just after midnight. At exactly 2:08 a.m., his phone buzzed. Front door unlocked. Guest has arrived. Noah quietly got out of bed and stared toward the apartment entrance. Nothing moved. The living room remained silent. He checked the peephole again. The hallway was empty. Then, his phone vibrated one final time. Guest is inside the property. Noah slowly looked away from the front door. If nobody had entered through the hallway, then whoever the app was referring to was already somewhere inside the apartment. Noah's heart immediately started racing. He was alone. He knew he was alone. Yet his phone insisted someone else was inside the apartment. He quietly grabbed a kitchen knife and checked every room. The bathroom, empty. The bedroom, empty. The closets, empty. He even looked beneath the bed before returning to the living room. Nothing. Feeling embarrassed, he placed the knife back on the counter. Maybe the app really was broken. Just as he started walking toward the bedroom, a soft chime echoed from his phone. Living room motion detected. Noah froze. The Airbnb app didn't even advertise motion sensors. He opened the notification. A floor plan of the apartment appeared on the screen. A small blue dot showed Noah standing in the hallway. A second gray dot sat perfectly still inside the living room, only a few feet behind him. He slowly turned around. The room was empty. The gray dot disappeared. The next morning, Noah contacted the host again, this time demanding answers. Instead of replying through the app, the host called him directly. His voice sounded nervous. "Can I ask you something? Have you been receiving notifications about another guest?" Noah's stomach tightened. "Yes." There was a long pause. Then the host admitted something he had never mentioned in the listing. 6 months earlier, another guest had complained about receiving the exact same alerts. The smart lock company inspected the system. They found nothing wrong. Airbnb refunded the guest, and the complaint was quietly closed. Noah asked the obvious question, "Why didn't you tell me?" The host sighed. "Because nobody else ever reported it again." That night was Noah's final night in Seattle. He packed everything before going to bed, planning to leave as soon as the sun came up. At exactly 2:08 a.m., his phone buzzed. Front door unlocked. Guest has arrived. He ignored it. 5 seconds later, guest entered bedroom. His blood ran cold. He looked toward the bedroom doorway. Nobody was there. The app chimed again. Guest standing beside window. Noah slowly turned toward the large window overlooking the city. Nothing. Then another notification appeared. Guest looking at you. Every light in the apartment suddenly switched off. Complete darkness. Noah didn't think. He grabbed his suitcase, unlocked the front door, and sprinted into the hallway. He didn't stop until he reached the lobby. The overnight security guard found him sitting outside 20 minutes later. Together, they returned to the apartment. Every light was back on. Everything looked exactly as Noah had left it. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing had been moved. The smart lock company later downloaded the apartment's activity log. The front door had never been unlocked that night. According to the system, nobody had entered the apartment after Noah checked in. Before flying home, Noah deleted the Airbnb app from his phone. A week later, he received an email asking him to review his stay. 5 stars had already been selected. The written review was already filled in. It read, "Beautiful apartment. Very quiet. I wasn't alone, but I got used to the company." The review had been submitted from Noah's account at 2:09 a.m. While he was still standing outside the apartment with the security guard, he deleted the review immediately. When he refreshed the page, it was gone. Airbnb support later confirmed no review had ever been posted. No trace of it existed. To this day, Noah still uses Airbnb whenever he travels. But there's one feature he refuses to use: smart locks. Because every so often, usually just after 2 in the morning, his phone lights up with a notification from an app he deleted years ago. Guest has arrived. He never opens it. Story 3. The Cabin Camera. 32-year-old David Turner and his wife, Emily, had been planning a family vacation for months. They wanted somewhere quiet where their 2 young sons could spend a few days away from phones, traffic, and crowded cities. After browsing dozens of listings, they booked a secluded log cabin in the Great Smoky Mountains of eastern Tennessee. The Airbnb listing looked perfect. A private lake, a wraparound porch, miles of hiking trails, and no neighboring houses for at least 2 miles. The host proudly described it as the ideal place to disconnect from the outside world. They arrived just before sunset on a warm July evening. The cabin was exactly as advertised. Tall pine trees surrounded the property. A wooden swing overlooked the lake. The nearest road couldn't even be seen from the porch. The first day was peaceful. The boys spent hours fishing while David grilled burgers outside. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Emily noticed something unusual high among the trees overlooking the backyard. A tiny red light, blinking. Slowly. On. Off. On. Off. David followed her gaze. "Probably a wildlife camera," he said. "People use them to watch deer." It made sense. The Smoky Mountains were full of wildlife. The blinking light didn't bother them. Until the next morning. While drinking coffee on the porch, David looked back toward the trees. The camera had moved. It was now pointing directly at the cabin. He frowned. He was certain it had been facing the lake the previous evening. Later that afternoon, he sent the host a quick message. "Hey, just wondering, is that your wildlife camera in the trees behind the cabin?" The reply arrived within minutes. "Yes, nothing to worry about. It only records animals." Satisfied, David put his phone away. That evening, the family sat around the outdoor fire pit making s'mores. Just before going inside, Emily glanced toward the trees again. The red light was blinking. Only now, it seemed lower than before, as though the camera had been moved closer. The following morning, David decided to take a walk through the woods before everyone else woke up. He followed the direction of the blinking light. After about 10 minutes, he found the tree. The camera was strapped securely around the trunk. It looked old, older than most trail cameras he'd seen before. He walked around it. The lens wasn't pointing toward the forest. It wasn't aimed at wildlife. It was aimed directly at the cabin's upstairs bedroom windows. David felt a knot form in his stomach. He immediately removed the memory card. There wasn't one. No batteries either. The camera shouldn't have been working at all. Confused, he carried it back to the cabin. Emily looked surprised. "You took it down?" David nodded. "There's no way this thing's recording anything." He placed it on the kitchen table. The boys spent the afternoon playing board games while David searched online for the camera model. Nothing matched. There wasn't even a company logo on it. As the sun began setting once again, Emily looked out through the living room window. Her face suddenly turned pale. "David." He walked over. High in the trees, a red light was blinking, exactly where the first camera had been. Slowly. On. Off. On. Off. David turned back toward the kitchen table. The camera he'd taken down was still lying exactly where he'd left it. Someone had put another one in the woods. David immediately grabbed a flashlight. He didn't care what the host had said anymore. Someone had either been watching the cabin or somebody was still out there. He and Emily agreed the boys would stay inside with every door locked while David checked the woods one last time. He followed the blinking light until he reached the same tree. The second camera was gone. Only the strap remained wrapped around the trunk. David looked around with his flashlight. The forest was completely silent. No footsteps. No branches snapping. Nothing. Then his phone vibrated. It was a message from the Airbnb host. "Please stop removing the cameras." David stopped walking. He hadn't told the host he'd taken the first one down. He quickly typed back, "How do you know I touched it?" Several minutes passed before the reply arrived. "Because I can always tell." David didn't answer. He turned around and headed straight back to the cabin. The following morning, the family decided to cut their vacation short. As they packed the SUV, David glanced toward the trees one last time. The red light was gone. For the first time since arriving, the woods looked completely normal. Before leaving, he walked over to the kitchen table to throw the old camera into his backpack. It wasn't there. He searched the entire cabin. Nothing. The camera had disappeared. Certain someone had entered the property, David contacted Airbnb while driving back toward Knoxville. The company opened an investigation and temporarily suspended the listing while they contacted the host. A week later, Airbnb emailed David with an update. The host denied placing any cameras in the woods. He claimed he hadn't used trail cameras for years. The property was inspected. No cameras were found anywhere. The investigation ended without an explanation. David tried to move on. Then, about a month later, Emily was organizing vacation photos on her laptop. She noticed one picture they hadn't taken. It had somehow been saved alongside the rest of their cabin photographs. The image showed their family sitting around the fire pit on the second night. David was roasting marshmallows. Emily was laughing. Their two boys were sitting on a blanket. The photograph had been taken from high above, somewhere deep inside the trees. David checked the file information. The picture had been created at exactly 8:47 p.m., the same time they had all been outside together. He zoomed in. Behind the cabin, barely visible between the trees, stood a person wearing dark outdoor clothing. Watching them, the figure hadn't been there when the photo was taken. At least, none of them had noticed. David immediately sent the image to Airbnb. They replied 2 days later. According to their records, the photograph had never been uploaded through the Airbnb app. It hadn't been attached to any support case either. They couldn't explain how it had ended up on his laptop. Several months later, David searched for the cabin online out of curiosity. The listing was gone. He assumed Airbnb had removed it. Instead, he found the same property listed on another vacation rental website under a different owner's name. Everything looked identical. Same photographs, same porch, same lake. One detail had changed. Near the bottom of the listing, beneath the house rules, was a sentence David was certain hadn't been there before. "For your privacy, please do not remove the wildlife cameras." David closed the page and never looked at it again. Today, hikers occasionally post photographs from trails overlooking that valley. Every now and then, someone notices a small blinking red light deep in the trees after sunset. Most assume it's just another trail camera recording wildlife. Few ever stop to ask themselves, who comes back every morning to point it toward the next guests? Story 4. The Basement Door. 5 college friends from Iowa State University had spent weeks planning a weekend together after finishing their spring exams. Instead of staying in a crowded hotel, they rented a large farmhouse through Airbnb about 40 minutes outside Des Moines. The listing advertised peaceful countryside views, a hot tub, and complete privacy. It looked like the perfect place to relax before heading home for the summer. The group consisted of Ethan, Mason, Chloe, Ava, and Jordan. They arrived just after 5 p.m. on a rainy Friday afternoon. The farmhouse sat at the end of a long gravel driveway surrounded by open fields. The nearest neighboring house was almost a mile away. It was old but well-maintained, with a wraparound porch, a large stone fireplace, and enough bedrooms for everyone. As they unpacked, Ethan found a welcome binder sitting on the kitchen table. Most of it contained normal information. Wi-Fi password, checkout instructions, emergency phone numbers. Then one page stood out. Please do not enter the basement under any circumstances. There was no explanation. Jordan laughed. Every Airbnb has some weird rule. Probably just where the owner stores their stuff. Nobody thought much about it. The basement door sat at the end of the hallway beside the laundry room. It was painted white and secured with a heavy padlock. That evening, they cooked dinner, played cards, and stayed up talking long after midnight. Around 1:30 a.m., while grabbing drinks from the kitchen, Chloe noticed something. The basement light was on. A thin line of warm yellow light spilled from beneath the locked door. She called the others over. Didn't we leave every light off? Ethan checked. Every room downstairs was dark. Only the basement door had light shining underneath it. Jordan knocked on it as a joke. Nobody answered. The group laughed it off and headed to bed. The following morning, the light was gone. During breakfast, Ethan messaged the host. "Hey, just wondering, is somebody staying in the basement?" The reply came back almost instantly. "No, please stay out of that area." Again, no explanation. That afternoon, heavy rain kept everyone inside. With nothing else to do, Jordan wandered back toward the basement. He crouched beside the keyhole. All he could see was another hallway stretching into darkness. Then, he heard the unmistakable sound of a suitcase rolling across a hard floor. Slowly, closer, then it stopped. Jordan stood up immediately. He waited. Nothing. When he told the others what he'd heard, Mason walked over and pressed his ear against the door. A few seconds later, his expression changed. "Someone's down there." The rest of the group fell silent. Very faintly, they could all hear footsteps, moving around beneath the house, as though someone was calmly walking from room to room. Then a door opened. Another door closed. Finally, a deep voice echoed from somewhere below. "New guests already?" The 5 friends stared at one another. Nobody laughed this time. The voice had been clear. It hadn't sounded angry. If anything, it sounded almost welcoming. Jordan slowly stepped away from the basement door. Did everyone hear that? Nobody answered. They all had. Ethan immediately messaged the host again. "Someone is in the basement." The reply came less than a minute later. "No one is in the basement. Please leave the door locked." That response only made things worse. If the host truly believed nobody was down there, then who had just spoken? The rest of the afternoon passed in uneasy silence. By sunset, they had all agreed to leave first thing the next morning. Nobody wanted to spend another night in the farmhouse. Just after midnight, the power briefly flickered. The lights went out for only a second before coming back on. When they did, the padlock was no longer hanging from the basement door. It rested neatly on the floor, still locked. The door itself stood open by several inches. Nobody moved. Finally, Ethan grabbed a flashlight. "We're checking once, then we're leaving." The basement stairs creaked beneath their feet as they descended. The air felt noticeably colder. At the bottom was a long concrete hallway lined with old storage rooms. Everything appeared abandoned. Dust covered the floor. Cobwebs filled the corners. There was no sign that anyone had been living there. Then Mason noticed something. A modern suitcase, standing upright against the wall. It had an airline baggage tag attached to the handle. The name read, Rachel Simmons. None of them recognized it. A few feet farther down the hallway stood another suitcase. Then another. Soon they realized the entire basement was filled with them. Dozens. Different colors. Different brands. Each one carried an Airbnb luggage tag. Every tag displayed a different guest's name. Some looked years old. Others appeared almost brand new. Curiosity got the better of Jordan. He unzipped the nearest suitcase. It was empty. No clothes. No toiletries. Nothing. Only a printed Airbnb welcome booklet folded neatly inside. Every other suitcase was exactly the same. Empty. As if whoever owned them had simply vanished. Then Chloe quietly pointed toward the end of the hallway. There was another door. Unlike everything else downstairs, this one looked new. Fresh white paint. Modern handle. No dust. A warm light glowed beneath it. The five of them stood silently. Then, someone on the other side tried the handle. Once. Twice. A calm voice spoke through the door. "Housekeeping. Just making sure everyone's checked out." The group didn't wait to hear anything else. They ran. They sprinted up the stairs, slammed the basement door shut, and shoved the nearest dining table against it before grabbing their bags and rushing outside. None of them cared that it was nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. They drove straight back toward Des Moines. Halfway there, Ethan's phone rang. It was the Airbnb host. His first words made Ethan pull the car onto the shoulder. "You went downstairs, didn't you?" Ethan admitted they had. The host sighed. "I've owned that farmhouse for 11 years. I changed the locks on the basement after my first guests complained about hearing voices. Every few years, someone opens it anyway. I always remove the listing for a while afterward." Ethan asked about the suitcases. There was a long silence. Then the host quietly replied, "There isn't anything stored in that basement. Not anymore." A week later, Airbnb refunded the entire trip and removed the listing while they investigated. According to their inspection report, the basement contained nothing except exposed pipes, an old furnace, and concrete walls. No storage rooms. No hallway. No suitcases. Months later, Jordan happened to be scrolling through Airbnb while planning another vacation. A familiar farmhouse appeared under a different host's account. Same porch. Same living room. Same photographs. The only difference was one new sentence at the bottom of the listing. "Please ensure all luggage is taken with you when checking out." Jordan immediately closed the app. To this day, none of the five friends can explain what they found beneath that farmhouse. But every one of them still remembers one detail they didn't notice until they were halfway home. When they counted the suitcases in the basement, there had been exactly 5 empty ones sitting together at the end of the hallway, waiting for new name tags. Story 5. The review that was posted tomorrow. 35-year-old Michael Evans traveled almost every week for work. As a regional sales manager based in Indianapolis, he spent more nights in Airbnbs than he did in hotels. He liked having a kitchen, a quiet place to work, and the feeling of staying somewhere that actually resembled a home. In November of 2026, Michael booked a modern loft apartment in downtown Chicago for a 2-night business trip. The listing had hundreds of 5-star reviews. Fast Wi-Fi, self-check-in, private rooftop access. Everything looked exactly like the kind of place he usually booked. He arrived just after 6 p.m. The loft was immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. Minimalist furniture filled the living room. A welcome basket sat on the kitchen counter with bottled water and snacks. The host sent a friendly message through Airbnb. "Hope you enjoy your stay. Let me know if you need anything." Michael thanked him and settled in for the evening. The next day was uneventful. He attended meetings, had dinner with clients, and returned to the apartment shortly before 10 p.m. His checkout wasn't until the following morning. Around midnight, Michael packed most of his suitcase so he could leave early. Before going to bed, he opened the Airbnb app to double-check the checkout instructions. Everything looked normal. He placed his phone on the bedside table and fell asleep. At exactly 3:06 a.m., his phone vibrated. Half asleep, he reached over and glanced at the screen. Airbnb notification. "Thanks for leaving your review." Michael frowned. He hadn't checked out yet. He certainly hadn't written a review. Curious, he opened the app. The review was already there. "The apartment was quiet, clean, and exactly what I needed. I won't be leaving." Michael stared at the screen. His name appeared beneath the review. His profile picture. His account. Everything looked legitimate. He immediately tried deleting it. The delete button didn't respond. He refreshed the page. The review disappeared. Confused, he assumed the app had suffered some kind of temporary glitch. He put his phone back down. 5 minutes later, another notification appeared. Host replied to your review. Michael slowly opened the app again. The review had returned. This time, there was a response beneath it. Thank you for staying with us. We'll see you again tomorrow. Michael checked the date displayed at the top of the conversation. It wasn't today's date. It was tomorrow's, his official checkout day. Somehow, the app was showing messages that hadn't happened yet. Michael rubbed his eyes and restarted his phone. When it powered back on, every notification had disappeared. The review was gone. The conversation looked completely normal again. Relieved, he convinced himself he'd imagined the whole thing through exhaustion. Then he noticed something. The digital clock beside his bed read 3:12 a.m. His phone buzzed once more. New Airbnb notification. Front door opened. Michael slowly looked toward the apartment entrance. The deadbolt was still locked. Nobody had come inside. Then another notification appeared. Guest has arrived. Michael's stomach tightened. According to the booking, he was already the guest. Michael slowly stood up from the bed. The apartment was silent. He walked to the front door and checked every lock. The deadbolt was engaged. The security chain was still in place. Nobody could have entered. Yet his phone insisted another guest had just arrived. He backed away from the door. Another notification appeared. Guest entered living room. Michael looked toward the empty living room. Nothing. Then, guest entered kitchen. He slowly turned his head. Still nothing. Every light remained exactly as he'd left it. His breathing became shallow. Another vibration. Guest entered hallway. The hallway leading toward his bedroom was only a few feet away. Empty. Then one final notification appeared. Guest standing outside bedroom. Michael didn't move. For almost 20 seconds, nothing happened. Then, from somewhere inside the apartment, he heard a single knock. Not on the front door. Not on a wall. It came from just outside the bedroom. Knock. 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 Michael grabbed his suitcase, unlocked the apartment door, and hurried into the hallway. He spent the rest of the night sitting in the lobby beside the overnight concierge. At sunrise, the concierge accompanied him back upstairs. The apartment looked untouched. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing had been moved. The concierge checked the electronic lock history. According to the building's records, the apartment door had never been opened after Michael checked in the previous evening. There had been no entries, no exits, nothing. Before leaving for the airport, Michael contacted Airbnb support. They apologized and suggested reinstalling the app. The representative also confirmed something unusual. Their system showed no review had ever been submitted from Michael's account. As far as Airbnb was concerned, it had never existed. Michael flew home and tried to forget about the experience. 3 months later, he returned to Chicago for another business trip. He booked a completely different Airbnb across the city. On his second night, just before going to sleep, his phone buzzed. An email from Airbnb. We noticed you never completed your previous stay. Please finish your checkout. Attached was a review waiting to be submitted. Everything was exactly as I expected. I'll be staying here permanently. Michael immediately deleted the email. Seconds later, another one arrived. Your host has replied. He reluctantly opened it. The response contained only one sentence. Your room is still ready. No host name. No property address. No photographs. Just that message. He contacted Airbnb again. The support representative searched every booking linked to his account. There was no record of the email. No unfinished stay. No hidden reservation. Nothing. Several weeks later, Michael requested a complete copy of his account history. Every trip he'd ever booked appeared in chronological order. Every trip, except the Chicago loft. It had vanished completely. No payment. No messages. No reservation. It was as though he'd never stayed there. Curious, Michael searched online for the property. The listing still existed. Same photographs. Same reviews. Same host. but one new 5-star review had appeared near the top. It had been posted the morning after Michael left. The username was hidden. The profile picture was blank. The review contained only 8 words. Still here. Still waiting. See you on your next stay. Michael closed the page and permanently deleted his Airbnb account that same day. He hasn't booked another vacation rental since. Friends often tell him he's overreacting, that it was probably just a software glitch. Maybe they're right. But if you ever receive a review confirmation before you've even checked out, don't open it. Because sometimes the reservation isn't ending. It's only changing who the property thinks belongs there. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Dreadful Visions for more unsettling tales inspired by everyday places and the strange experiences that turn ordinary trips into unforgettable nightmares. Sleep well tonight, if you can.